So welcome everyone. I'm Tracy Frisch. I'm the founder and the current outgoing chair of the Clean Air Action Network of Glens Falls. And we are very pleased to present Jennie Romer talking about her new book, Can I Recycle This? And her work with plastics reduction as a plastics reduction attorney. I happened to hear about Jennie only a couple of weeks ago when I turned on the public radio station in Albany, WAMC, and happened upon an interview with her. So I immediately sat down and listened. And then I thought I had a meeting later that day with someone who's going to be joining the board about what we would do for our annual meeting. And we were quite behind. And so I went on her website and decided, there's a publicist. Let me see if we can invite her. And I thought it was a long shot and it wasn't going to happen. But, and I talked to Tom, who I was meeting with that evening, and he thought it was a good idea. And later I heard back from her publicist, and then I heard from Jennie, and I actually didn't invite her right then. It took me several days to get around to sending an invite, sending an email. And here she is. And I just learned earlier today that Jennie is the mother of a 7-week-old infant. So it's doubly impressive that she's joining us. So I'll tell you a little bit about Jennie Romer and why we're so impressed. First of all, her interview was great. I have been involved in recycling and zero waste activities for a long time. So it was really great to have someone who could talk about this stuff and interest people, because often people are like, yeah, recycling, that's old hat. But she really is getting the attention of the public and the hosts in the various TV and radio shows that she is interviewed at. Jennie Romer is a sustainability activist, an attorney, and a writer. I mentioned her new book. For more than a decade, she's worked for effective legislation to reduce waste and single-use plastics. She's a legislative associate at the Surfrider Foundation's Plastic Pollution Initiative. So she's working on the policy level, and her expertise is in demand by legislators, environmental nonprofits, and businesses around the country. One of the things that is so appealing about her book, Can I Recycle This?, is that it's a non-judgmental guide to better recycling and how to reduce single-use plastics. And so we welcome people at this talk, whether you are deep in the trenches working on zero waste issues, or you're just an ordinary person who's wondering how you can recycle better and why there isn't more recycling. So I want to mention a few things before we turn it over to Jennie. The first is that, so we're a air pollution group. We formed because in the city of Glens Falls, the small city of Glens Falls on the Hudson River, for those of you outside of the region, it's located about 60 miles north of Albany, the state capital. The city of Glens Falls has a paper mill, a cement plant, one of two in the whole state, and 2 miles north of a trash incinerator, one of the dirtiest trash incinerators in the whole country, with the highest mercury emissions per ton of waste burned, and the highest and the third highest lead emissions, or maybe I got those reversed, but very high in lead and mercury emissions, and in the middle of a residential neighborhood. So we are interested in recycling because anything that can be done to divert waste that would otherwise go to a landfill or an incinerator is beneficial for the environment and for public health. and also for resources. And we should not be wasting resources. There's a lot of embodied energy. Embodied energy translates often to greenhouse gases in all the stuff that we throw away. And when we burn it, we release greenhouse gases another time. So our group has a zero waste initiative. We're working for better recycling, for composting and reuse, among other things. Better waste management and better management of all of our resources. So I want to shout out to those of you who are working on zero waste, not only through our group, but in the greater capital region and all over the country. Thank you for coming and welcome everyone. And let me turn it over to Jennie Romer.
Thanks so much for having me. I'm going to go ahead and share my screen. And I'm not going to be able to see the chat once I go into present mode. So if Tracy, if you want to keep an eye on the chat, then I can.
I forgot to say, anyone who has questions or comments, please post in the chat. Thank you.
Okay, we're going to start at the beginning. So I'm Jennie Romer. Thanks for having me speak here. I've been doing a lot of radio interviews. Haven't been doing very many community group webinars yet because I'm on maternity leave. But I thought this seemed like a very well-connected group, and it was a very nice invitation. So I thought it would be a good way to spend my evening. So the book is Can I Recycle This? You can, if you want to follow it or tag it on social media, on Twitter, it's CIRT book. On Instagram, it's Can I Recycle This book? And I appreciate the shout outs there. I'll first tell you a little bit about myself. So I am an environmental lawyer, and I really took on the plastics industry by fighting to develop plastic reduction legislation for certain single-use items. For anyone who knows me, I'm the plastic bag person. So I've been fighting for plastic bag laws for over a decade. Started in San Francisco. When I was a law student, San Francisco passed their initial bag law, and I started volunteering for the Board of Supervisors office, became kind of a point of contact for other places looking to adopt plastic bag laws. I realized that the plastics industry was super organized. I saw a presentation where they were trying to fundraise $700,000 to spend on fighting local plastics laws. And that was before San Francisco had even officially introduced their bag ban ordinance. So I thought, there's something happening here. And I started a website, plasticbaglaws.org. And, without really knowing how websites worked at that time, it was a long time ago. And really decided to make myself be the expert on plastic bags. So I spent a lot of time on that. And now, let's see if I can. Now my day job is as a legal associate for the Surfrider Foundation's Plastic Pollution Initiative. I work on plastic pollution policy full-time, including the federal Break Free from Plastic Pollution Act and lots of state and local policies. That's a photo of me testifying before Congress last year for a ban on water bottles at national parks, and that's the lobbyist for the International Bottled Water Association that is sitting next to me testifying there. So that's what I do. Go to the next slide. Then while researching and advocating for plastic reduction policy, I learned a lot about the logistics of recycling. So I spent a lot of time, figuring out what evidence I had that plastic recycling wasn't working, particularly for plastic bags and for things like foam foodware and straws, because when we had hearings about these things, the industry groups would say, we should be recycling. And I think a lot of us here know that's really not the answer, but I needed to come up with a lot of evidence and talking points on that. So I learned a lot about the whole recycling system. That's me on a tour of Pratt Recycling, the paper recycling in New York City. I'm not actually working the machinery there, just posing with it. But I really enjoy going on recycling tours. So I learned a lot that way too. So now I want to take on the whole recycling system and talk about that rather than just about plastic bags. So the book focuses on primarily on what happens after things are put into the recycling bin. And I look at 60 different items and specifically talk about whether they are recyclable or not. And it's not just, it really varies locally whether you can put something in your recycling bin, but recycling is a global commodities market. So what there's actually an end market for, what actually gets turned into a new item doesn't vary as quite nearly as much. And so I look at 60 different items. I also look at the humanitarian impacts, particularly of plastic pollution and plastics in the ocean, what personal solutions people can do, and then really in policy. So not surprisingly, my background is policy. This book, the take home, is really about policy, but I wanted to talk about it in a different way. So rather than just saying, we should do this, I really wanted to run through how the whole system works and let people kind of make up their own minds about how big of a deal they think it is. And it's a beautifully illustrated watercolor illustrations in the book by Christy Young, the illustrator that I worked with. And that really, I think, opens it up to a lot of different audiences. So people who might just want to get the book because it looks pretty and put it on their coffee table, that's great. Or that think it's a children's book, but really it gets into a lot of into resin codes, it gets into commodities market. So it goes far beyond just kind of the pretty face that it has. So, and that was really intentional. I wanted to reach an audience beyond the people who are already interested in this, who already think that plastic pollution is a problem. And so this is a quote from Frontline's Plastic Wars. It's a really great documentary. If anyone hasn't seen it, I highly suggest checking it out. And so the former head of the Society of the Plastics Industry says, if the public thinks that recycling is working, then they're not going to be concerned about the environment. So that really stood out to me because the plastics industry in particular has spent a lot of money on really promoting recycling as the answer for a long time, for decades. And so, we've been taught that recycling is a great thing that we can do for the environment. People feel good about it, but that was very intentional. The plastics industry and other industries have spent so much money on that, on making us have that warm, fuzzy feeling when we put something into our recycling bins. And, that's good some of the time, but other times it's making us not think about beyond just recycling. So I want people to think more about what they're putting in their bins. So I think probably a lot of you know this, the chasing arrow symbol or resin are really resin codes. So the Society of the Plastics Industry introduced resin codes in 1988. And many consumers really assume that if they have that little chasing arrow symbol on the bottom, that product or that package is automatically recyclable. But it really is just telling you what type of plastic, what resin that container is made out of. It isn't an indication that it's recyclable. And generally, the lower numbers are more recyclable than the higher numbers. For example, number 1 and number 2 are the bottles and jugs of those are the most valuable plastics on the commodities market. And so I did some research into that specifically, I'll talk about later. And the higher numbers really don't have a market. So number 6, for example, polystyrene, nobody really wants to buy and doesn't really have a domestic market to be made into something else, except for some very small pilot programs. So if a lobbyist for Dark Container or for someone working on that, they will point to a pilot program, but I'm not really considering that to be recyclable. So here's a little illustration of some of the various, oh, yikes, of some of the various uh, resin codes. It just kind of gives you a peek into what the book looks like. So some nice, cute illustrations. And then this is my illustration about regular polystyrene versus foam polystyrene. So this one cup is more of a clear, rigid plastic cup that's made out of polystyrene. I say bad, just to use a little more common language. That isn't going to really find a market domestically. But then foam foodware, expanded polystyrene or EPS, some people call it styrofoam, but you might get a cease and desist order because that's a trademarked term meant for building material. It makes it harder to lobby about, or to harder to talk about. So those are even harder to recycle. Those nobody is going to want to buy those and shrink them down, get rid of all that extra air, and turn it into rigid polystyrene. And then recycling is really just about, it's helpful. Recycling is beneficial to the environment because it helps avoid the impacts of extraction and disposal. So this is kind of how I think about materials. This is similar to Break Free from Plastic movements diagram, where materials go through all of these steps. But if you're recycling, then at least you're not having to deal with the extraction phase or the waste disposal phase. But even with recycling, you're still having to deal with a lot of greenhouse gas emissions from manufacture and distribution, and recycling itself. And so, the ultimate goal really should be reduction and reuse. And that's something that is not talked about enough in our, when people talk about the environment, talk about recycling. Really, we should be talking about the 3 R's, reduction and reuse first. With the book, I chose to lead with recycling just to get people's attention, because a lot of people just kind of want to do the right thing, want to put the right things in their bins. And so I want to talk to those people and then lead to reduction and reuse, in addition to making recycling more effective. So I use the Federal Trade Commission's 3-part test for marketing things as recyclable. So first, think you need to have accessibility. 60% of consumers need to have access to recycling facilities for those materials. Second, sortability. You need to be able to sort it with existing infrastructure. Third, end markets. Someone needs to really want to buy that material consistently and convert it into a new item. So I have a diagram of the Sims Municipal Recycling Facility. They are a metal, glass, and plastic facility in New York City. And so I walk the readers through what that facility does. And, I've been on a lot of tours. I've toured Sims quite a few times, and I worked with them on making this diagram. So people have a sense of, what happens next after they put things in their bins. Because I think right now, so many people just put it in their bins and kind of hope that it really gets recycled. And so here's a little bit more, talk about the kind of machinery that's used, the magnets, the electrical currents, the various screens, and the optical sorting, which is used for plastics to sort it by which resin types. And then everything's put into a bale and sold on the commodities market. So I have this woman who's selling commodities. So this is the next step. And so effective recycling really requires end markets, meaning someone wants to buy them. And most low value plastics don't have a reliable end market. So that means that it either gets sent to landfill or incinerated, which we talked about earlier, or for a long time has been sent abroad. where there's a lot less regulation, a lot less oversight, a lot less enforced regulation at least. And so that's really a humanitarian and an environmental issue that's outsourced, that's abroad. And so that's not good either. And so we really need to look at recycling differently and look at it as a commodities market rather than a feel-good enterprise, and really develop policy that's based on that, so we can make a really effective system here in the US and really require manufacturers to make their packaging recyclable, or source reduce first and then make it recyclable in the US in a real way. And so we'll talk about more about that later. So, I just said what happens when a material lacks an end market. It goes to landfill or incineration. This is some research I did about the plastics commodities market. I think this is one of the most exciting parts of my book. I don't know about you, but really looking at how much these are selling for. And so HDPE natural, which is plastic resin type number 2, the bottles and jugs. So the orange line is just for bottles and jugs. Those are the most valuable plastics on the market right now. So they sell for about $1,000 a ton. And so if you look at the commingled number 3 through 7s, those sell for about negative $17 a ton. So that's a huge difference. There's one that type of the HDPE companies want to buy and use to make into a new item. A lot of the time, that's cosmetics companies are using a lot of it to make their packaging. And so that's recycling that works for the most part. And then the 3 through 7s, those, selling it to someone for negative $17, meaning you're having to pay them to take it away, is still a little bit better than paying the tipping fee to have it sent to a landfill or incinerated, which is about $50 or $60 a ton on national average, but really varies depending on where you are. So this is like kind of my framework for how I'm thinking about these recyclables. And I think we specifically wanted to, and here's a stat, only 9% of plastic ever produced has been recycled. So a lot of that is because a lot of what we're using is really low value, and so some of it's some infrastructure issue as well. And then I know we wanted to talk about glass a little bit too. The biggest issue with glass, or one of the big issues with glass, is that it's heavy. So glass recycling works best if there is a local glass recycling facility. There are some programs, particularly in the book, I point to Germany, where there are local glass drop-off programs in each neighborhood, where people are sorting by color, because as you can see here, the sorted glass is worth more, the clear is worth the most, and then the sorted by color is worth more than the mixed. But you'll see that these values are a lot less than some others, because this is by the ton and glass is rather heavy. And also glass is, some of it's made into bottles, a lot of it's used as aggregate for roads or as landfill cover. So alternative daily cover for some landfills. So, it's not really a bottle to bottle situation in some cases. But really the biggest thing is having local facilities, so that there are less transport costs, and also that means less greenhouse gases if we're not traveling as far. But I would also say that having a local glass facility also means that you are maybe then capable of also having a refill and reuse opportunity, because you really need to have that local bottler in order to potentially be able to have a refillable system. In Germany, it's really standard to have beer bottles and soda bottles that come in refillable bottles, some of them glass, some of them plastic. That's not common in the US, and that's something I'd really like to see. There's a pilot project in Oregon where they are where they have beer bottles that are refilled and reused rather than recycled. So that's something to look at and to push for. We can talk about a little bit more about that in the policy section. Then I also talk about wish cycling. So things that people like to put in their recycling bins because people like to, the kind of idea behind wish cycling is that even if your local jurisdiction says they don't want something, or maybe you're not completely paying attention to those rules, people still want to put things into their bins because it makes them feel good. Because we've been taught that recycling is such a great thing, people kind of go overboard. So it's something that is people like to wish cycle are smalls. So really small items, usually under 2 inches, that will fall through the screens of facilities. And then tanglers. Tanglers tend to be really expensive for recycling facilities to deal with. And one big type of tangler are plastic bags. They get caught in the recycling machinery, and facilities have to spend some time cleaning them up. And then things like paper towels and tissues, those are made of short fibers, and short fibers really are not recyclable. You need to have long fibers to be able to stick on the screens at paper facilities. Then awkwardly shaped things like plastic forks. And one big thing that you definitely should never wish cycle are batteries, and particularly rechargeable batteries. Rechargeable lithium-ion batteries have caused explosions and fires at recycling facilities, so much so that some facilities are having problems getting insurance. So that's a big deal. And that's something where I have 2 pages in my book, a warning about that, and then a second page that says, no, these cause fires. Please don't recycle your lithium ion batteries. So, just try to have some tips there. And then I get into plastics in the ocean and everywhere. So I talk about plastics in the ocean, particularly in efforts to clean it up, beach cleanups, things like that. And then talk about the human impacts. So the impacts to fence line communities of things like incineration and plastic production. I talk about China's sword, where they're not taking our low value plastics anymore, and other things. And then the impacts of our waste on developing countries and efforts to stop that, including the Basel Convention. So I know this is a lot, but just giving you a sense here before we get into the Q&A of what I cover. And then really the take home that I really care about, the policy solutions. So, get into some policies, plastic bags, which is my, that's in my wheelhouse of policies I've worked on a lot. Recycled content mandates. So that's something we're seeing pushed a bit more, where if you're making, for example, making a paper bag, requiring that those bags include a certain percent of post-consumer recycled waste, meaning that's what goes into a recycling bin and then is sold on the commodities market to a company, and they incorporate it into their products. And so with those requirements, we're really improving the end markets. We're making it so that there are more companies who really want to buy what we're putting in our curbside bins, and making it profitable again for the municipal recyclers. And then comprehensive foodware policies, like Berkeley, California, requires reusable foodware for dine-in meals, which, as we're opening restaurants back up, that's something that would be great to see. And something that's even more simple is just requiring that restaurants and delivery platforms ask people, or require that people have to opt in to getting silverware and straws, because right now so many people are getting automatically getting a lot of the plastic utensils when they don't really need them, and that's bad for the environment and costs restaurants money. So those are just a couple of the policies, but there are quite a few others that we delve into. And then I wanted to share this map. This is something that we published at Surfrider back in March. And it's an interactive map of all state and local plastic reduction policies. So you can click on and off and see well, all that we have on it so far are bags, straws, and foam foodware. When I am back from maternity leave, we're going to add on a few more layers. But it's a data set project that we've been working with Plastic Pollution Coalition on, and with our chapter, the Surfrider chapter volunteers, for quite a while. And if you click on each law, you'll get some information about it, and most of the time get a link to the ordinance. So that's something I'm really proud of. It really showcases how far we've come over the last 10 years. There's so many policies. There are 1,000 that are just on that map in the US. And then getting beyond just the single item policies, you know, so much of what we've worked on so far have been reducing plastic, plastic bags and foam foodware and straws. And that's something really tangible that people see, can understand, is we've figured out how to address. But the next step for policy really is extended producer responsibility for packaging. There's a bill pending in the New York State legislature right now that has some movement, and that would require manufacturers to pay for the recycling, disposal, and cleanup of their packaging. And right now, that's on local governments and taxpayers to pay for all those costs. And in New York in particular, the municipal recyclers, some of them are going to the legislature and saying, hey, we are no longer making any money doing this. We're losing money because we're getting so much low value stuff in our waste stream. And moving forward with a policy that really puts the onus on manufacturers to be responsible, because right now it leaves their hands. They have no responsibility for it, and that's just really not fair. So these policies would also ideally include incentives for source reduction, include post-consumer recycled content mandates and better design, like banning certain toxins and having requiring non-detachable lids so we don't get lots of bottle caps floating out in the ocean. And ideally incentivizing a shift to refill and reuse systems. So the Break Free from Plastic Pollution Act at the federal level also includes these types of policies. And then I also talk about personal solutions. So one big take home is follow your local jurisdiction's rules for what you put in your recycling bins. I talk about kind of what happens next. And for some of these, there isn't a really good fate probably, but if your jurisdiction wants you to put your, red party cups in your recycling bins, do that. Especially if you'll get a fine if you don't, but just know kind of what happens next based on what I'm saying in the book. So I want to make that clear. And then other personal solutions are just bringing your own everything. So bags, bringing your own water bottle, cup, utensils, and buying in bulk whenever you can. But not everyone has access to that, and COVID's added some restrictions that are hopefully being lifted around now. And then just being aware of greenwashing and wish cycling. So, hopefully with knowing how the recycling system works, being able to tell if a company's maybe pushing their product is sustainable when it might not be, which is greenwashing. And then I think the biggest take home is advocating for plastic policy efforts by supporting bans, including bans on international disposal and EPR models and more. And then I guess here's my plug to please buy the book. And I think we've left quite a bit of time for questions. Now, if you have if you'd like to find out more about the book or future events, you can check out jennieromer.com, and it'll take you right to my book page, and I'm listing my social media here again. So thanks so much for inviting me to speak, and I look forward to answering your questions.
So I'm going through the chat and I'm going to read some questions, but maybe in the meantime, Jennie, that was wonderful. It's really great work you're doing. I'm wondering if you want to address any of the questions that were sent to you in advance.
I think, let me exit my full screen.
Okay, and I'm trying to navigate the chat to come up with some questions
Sure.
because there's
Um,
lots of comments in the chat, and um,
I'm going to go ahead and stop sharing on my side. Um, I think I covered, so I covered glass a bit. Um, there were a couple questions about, oh, I see one on the, on the, one in the chat I can address with the Institute for Local Self-Reliance and Neil over there. Yeah, I've been on panels with Neil, and I think there are some EPR policies that were put forward a while ago that some groups had concerned with. But I think this time around, we've had so much engagement from local groups, from municipal recyclers, from a lot of community groups into EPR, and so to make sure that there really is, it's something that's really being pushed um, by the recyclers and by the groups rather than just by industry. Because I think that there was some concern of preemption, that if an EPR law, extended producer responsibility law, was adopted, then it might block other policies like bag laws. But now, we're making sure that a lot of the groups that had worked on bag laws are working on EPR. So there's a lot more oversight and a lot more attention on the issue. So I don't have that concern, but it's something that we're making sure that we're paying attention to.
I'm going to address that briefly, and I'm going to also share some information with the registrants. Um, in British Columbia, there is an EPR law that has um, taken the recycling sector backwards. It has caused, there have been academic studies of it, and there has been some backlash against extended producer responsibility, I believe in California, because people are learning about how EPR can be if it's industry dominated, and there's these organizations that EPR legislation often creates called producer
Mhm,
responsibility organizations, which tend to be industry organizations. Um, and so I'm happy to share information. I've been on some conference calls with people who are extremely concerned based on what the experiences have been in places like British Columbia, which is the poster child for bad EPR.
mhm,
So it's something to be quite aware of, and I think we need larger discussion about this. And it's so wonky that it's really hard to get
mhm,
people who just want to reduce plastic to understand the depths of it, especially with our generally very shallow media. You know,
mhm,
so it's something that we really need to, I think about carefully. And so, yeah.
mhm. Yeah, and I would say, I've spent the last couple of years really focused on it, and I see it as holding producers responsible and having more oversight, having more requirements for what our packaging looks like. And I really don't see a way to get to a really effective um, recycling system without some change at the top of what's produced in the first place. And so for everything on the store shelves, and I think, with individual items, with bags, that's something where we've seen that people, that's something tangible, it's kind of easier. It's one thing, and then everything on grocery store shelves is a bigger challenge. And so it's something that takes a lot more time. And figuring out exactly what that structure should look like takes a long time too. So, but yeah, it's definitely controversial about exactly how to get there, but we're learning a lot from other jurisdictions, including California and British Columbia, of what to do and what not to do. Because we've had EPR for things like carpet and batteries for a long time, so we have a lot of different case studies to learn from as well. but there's a whole lot of industry that's pushing back on it too. A lot of consumer packaged goods industry, plastics industry. So I think, it's something that's complicated, but it's something that we need, I think we need to address, but definitely a larger discussion probably than right here too.
Right. I think it's just important to let people know there are some issues. It's complicated and there needs discussion. So, is my sound better? It was brought to my attention that my sound was poor and my settings weren't good. Can you hear me better?
Yeah, I
Okay,
can hear you
good.
fine.
Okay. So, other questions. Someone asked whether you work with Beyond Plastics and Judith Enck, who is in our region. So she's very well known to us.
Yeah, I know Judith well. I've known her for years, and it's great. I think she's doing a great job of really getting a lot of engagement on these issues. And we're both part of the Break Free from Plastic movement, which is a global movement. So I recommend checking out the Break Free from Plastic website as well. And if your organization that you're involved with isn't a member yet, to look into signing on as well.
Okay, I'm looking for questions, and if someone has posted a question and it's not being answered, you can type it in again. Okay, so James asked, is the plastic industry reimbursing recyclers for the low value of commingled plastics?
No, not at all. And so that's essentially what some EPR models would be. So one model would be that if a producer is making all this low value plastic, then they would have to reimburse the local recycler for processing it. And that would really provide incentive to the manufacturer to stop producing that low value plastic to use something else. So that's one way to look at one model of EPR, but it's definitely not happening right now.
Okay, so Mary Beth writes, I'm currently visiting Boulder and I got a drink in a cup that looks like styrene, but says it is compostable. Is there such a thing? Does it confuse things when such a cup is put in a single stream recycling pickup, which is what happens in Boulder?
Yeah, compostable and biodegradable plastic is a whole other issue. It's covered briefly in the book. But I will say compostable means something in the US. So if something is claiming to be compostable, it needs to meet a certain standard, which is generally the D6400 standard. But even then, if it meets that certain standard of testing, it still needs to be in a place where there's commercial composting, where there's a facility that takes it. And so that's a huge problem. If it's put in your recycling bin, no, it's not going to be recycled at all. And so that'll just end up with all the other residue that ends up getting sent to landfill or incinerated. And so I generally avoid compostable or biodegradable plastic, and I kind of cringe when I see it in places that don't have, especially in places that don't have that commercial composting facility, because it's really specifically meant to only compost there.
Right, and it needs industrial composting, not backyard composting because
Exactly.
the
Yeah.
heat. And I just want to add that in Oregon, there was an open letter by a number of major composters saying, we do not want your compostable tableware. It does not, it messes up our composting system. We have to remove it when we're finished composting because it takes too long to degrade. So please stop using it.
Mhm. Yeah, I
So
love that letter. I quote it all the time. I think
me
it,
too. I share it. So
yeah.
Christian asked the Break Free from Plastic Pollution Act. Is that the name of it? Did I get that correct? How do they pay and to whom?
So the Break Free from Plastic Pollution Act is federal legislation. It really encompasses the whole life cycle of plastic. So it includes a lot of different policy mechanisms. So it includes a moratorium on permits for new plastic production facilities. It includes a bag law. It includes a foam foodware ban. It includes a national bottle deposit. It includes a ban on export of low value plastic waste. And it includes recycled content mandates, and it includes an EPR system. So in that system, there would be a product stewardship organization set up, and companies would have to pay into that into that fund. And then that fund would be used for, I think right now it's set up in not in really a reimbursement kind of a way, but I would kind of like to see a little bit more, or yeah, it's set up based on Washington's model for the most part. But that fund is really what's going to be used to create the infrastructure to reimburse the local governments. And so it's a little bit complicated, but it's something that is really important to really be able to move forward with creating an effective system. And and like I said, the Break Free from Plastic Pollution Act includes a whole lot of other stuff that would make it so that we're really seeing the higher quality materials being used and less low value plastic.
Hmm, great. Thank you for that explanation. So in Warren County, where Glens Falls is located, and many of the participants are from, and in my county, Washington County, next to Warren, um, um, most waste is dealt with privately by private haulers. There are town-owned and operated transfer stations in Warren County, but they manage a relatively small percentage of waste. So, and this is actually increasingly common that the local infrastructure has been sold off or closed down, in part because recycling doesn't pay as it used to, and in part just because of a um, massive trend of privatization by local governments who are hard strapped for cash.
Mhm.
So, yeah, it's almost too late to get any infusion of funds because there's nothing left. Very sad.
Yeah, but I think, going back to extended producer responsibility or whatever you want to call it,
Yeah.
really redefining that system so that we're not just letting manufacturers off the hook for
Oh, yeah.
producing all this stuff and then not having to deal with it on the back end. And so, municipalities used to make a lot of money and selling, recycling was a money making business to collect all this stuff, sort it, and sell it. And right now they are not able to sell it. They're having to pay to landfill it. So I think we really, some places it's really progressed a lot more than others. But I think that's really where we need to put some energy.
So Nancy asked, is boxboard still being recycled? Because the local transfer station stopped accepting it in the last year.
Okay.
Boxboard being what cereal boxes, for example, are made of, not non-corrugated cardboard.
I have that as recyclable in my book. And but there are some places that are not taking it as much, or some places that have stopped taking it. But for the most part, it is still being accepted.
Great. Okay. Sean asks, what are your thoughts on how Canada just recently considered plastics as toxic under Canada's primary environmental law, the Canadian Environmental Protection Act? Will it actually help? And is there any chance that the US could follow suit?
Yeah, I think there are a lot of groups working on this from different angles, and that's something that hasn't really gained as much traction, or very much traction, in the U.S. But I was really happy to see that in Canada, and I'm interested to see where it goes, and I think it'll spark more interest here in the U.S. as well.
Yayoi asked, apologies for circling back to the same question, but have any changes been made to the Break Free from Plastic Pollution Act of 2021 about the polluter controls model since the problem surfaced about a month ago?
From the polluter controls model, I'm not sure what.
I guess I think this relates to the extended producer responsibility issue. And if
Well,
you've said enough, and that's fine.
yeah, we've been working. I actually introduced the two legislators who ended up introducing the Break Free from Plastic Pollution Act. I introduced their legislative staff a few years ago, so I've been really directly involved with it for a long time, and was involved with the reintroduction as well. And so, with the reintroduction, we were spending a lot of time on the EPR parts. And I think I was happy with what we ended up with in the bill, but it's still a work in progress. I think There's, this is a huge, huge deal. And so I think that there's still nuances that are going to be added over time. And also we have 10 packaging or EPR packaging laws at the state level as well. And so there's a lot of different models that are being tried out, a lot of different nuances, things that we were really pushing for in the new version of the Break Free from Plastic Pollution Act were an emphasis on reuse and refill models, an emphasis on source reduction, an emphasis on further regulation of chemicals that were allowed in packaging. And so we got all of that stuff, and we're really happy with it.
Okay, well, this does call for further discussion and communication, I think. So, a question about plastic bags that stretch, being recyclable. What about other plastic film used to wrap individually sliced cheese slices and bars of cheese and grapes and stuff? And if you want to just talk about plastic film in general, and
Sure, yeah, and I have a spread about plastic, or I have two spreads about it in the book. First one is just that plastic bags are not recyclable curbside. 90%, 97% of US jurisdictions, because they're tanglers and they really don't have that end market. I saw one of the questions in the chat was about Trex. Trex is the biggest buyer of plastic film. They turn it into, they use it as an additive to kind of composite decking, which, it's not a valuable material at all. And otherwise, most of it's shipped abroad, which isn't happening as much anymore. But for the most part, if you put your plastic bags in the curbside, that's bad. It's not going to be, it's just going to be sent to landfill for the most part. Some places try to take it and bail it if they can. But the grocery store drop-off programs, that's a bit of a different story. Those tend to be a cleaner stream because it's being dropped off rather than put in bins. But there really is hardly any transparency about what happens to those films. And so people drop them off. Sometimes there's problems with contamination on the front end because maybe someone else thinks it's a garbage can and throws their half empty soda inside. And we don't really have much reporting. The American Chemistry Council reports to the EPA, and the American Chemistry Council is a lobbyist organization that works on plastic, basically, and promotes plastic and other chemicals. So we don't know enough about what happens next, but New York State has a law requiring certain grocery stores to have a plastic film drop off, and expanded it to not just be bags, but be other plastic films as well. And I'm not sure about the crinkly versus non-crinkly. It really depends on the type of film. So I would check what regulations maybe are on the bin. But I would say no to cheese. I think things like saran wrap, that's going to be, it's not just a straight, it's not a HDPE or LDPE, which are what are accepted. And it also probably has some contamination issues as well. So unfortunately, don't think that that's going to be something you should put in that bin. Oh, I think you might be muted or had a little.
Can you hear me now?
Yep, now I can hear you.
Oh my, I'm so sorry. I should get a microphone, but just wanted to ask you the big question about single stream versus dual stream. And dual stream, for those who don't know, is where recyclables are collected curbside. The paper and cardboard is in one bin, and the containers, whether they're plastic, metal, or glass, are in another bin. Do you have any thoughts on single stream versus dual stream? Because we know that single stream is extremely contaminated.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, so in the book, I don't take a stance. I just explain what the two systems are. And because I try to give some leeway to the local jurisdictions for what they decide based on whatever calculus they have. And that's the same is true for whether they accept all rigid plastics or just ones and twos, ones and two bottles and jugs. So for dual stream, you're definitely going to end up with a cleaner stream, especially for the paper. But I don't take an outright stance on that. But I would, I definitely lean dual stream to make sure that there is a cleaner stream of recyclables.
Here's a good question. Do Biden's climate plans include any funding for recycling?
Not that I've seen so far, and I've been out for almost 2 months on maternity, so there might have been something that's happened very recently. But I will say, with the Break Free from Plastic Pollution movement, Surfrider has been involved with the presidential action plan. You can go to plasticfreepresident.org and see all the requests that were made to the Biden administration. And we also worked on putting together requests for budget items related to plastic reduction and recycling. So I think that's a really important, to look to executive actions is really important right now, as well as legislation.
This question is making me feel queasy. Is there any market for using waste product in road building? Evidently, it lasts longer than asphalt. I think we would not be real thrilled with that.
Yeah, I'm not thrilled with it either. I'm concerned with some microplastics being part of that equation as well. And we already know that tires are a big source of microplastics, so additional probably wear and tear on the waste used in roads. But I know that's something that's definitely being looked into as well. And so, I'm sure we'll hear more about it.
Thank you. I'm sometimes confused by organizations trying to promote less plastic. Some may be supported by the petrochemical industry, wolf in disguise. Break free from plastics upstream. What ones are not legit? What ones to avoid?
So upstream, I would say it's legit, and Surfrider, where I work, and there are a lot of really great organizations working on plastic reduction right now. I would say the break free from plastic is a movement, not really so much of an organization itself. It really is a convener of other organizations. So, and they have really they have a mission statement that organizations have to accept in order to be part of it. So I would use that kind of as a vetting source. So I would look at, if you're curious about an organization, look at the Break Free from Plastic movement website and see whether they're listed. I think that's one good source. But you could also look at, for an organization, look at the about, look at who their funders are. The plastics industry is definitely, they use really progressive, nice sounding names for a lot of their front groups, like, the American Progressive Recyclable Bag Association is the front group for the plastic bag industry nationally. In California, we had Save the Plastic Bag Coalition, or Citizens for Effective Recycling or something like that. So it definitely gets a little bit harder because industry groups really like to adopt names that are a bit confusing. So yeah, interesting question, but I'd use the Break Free from Plastic movement to vet organizations a bit.
We used to call those astroturf groups.
Yep, and there's a lot of that astroturfing happening.
Someone with my name, but I think it's because there's multiple people use my account. Do you know anything about the status of recycling of lithium ion batteries?
That is just for drop-off programs. Like I said in the book, that's a huge problem. I think maybe we'll see more talk about it, maybe easier drop-off programs, given that it's such a huge problem for municipal recyclers. I spoke at a conference for waste management haulers, specifically the guys driving trucks. And a lot of them showed me, videos on their phones of trucks on fire. And so that's a huge problem. And it's not, just a theoretical concern. It's a real, like, human problem with fires. So I think we'll see a lot more about that hopefully soon, education and easier programs for drop off.
Yes, it also happens at the recycling sorting facilities.
Right. I mean, they're getting kind of banged around at the sorting facilities.
Sure, yes. Is there a group of engaged scientists and engineers who are scouring the news and calling out misleading info? We need to correct a lot of misperceptions, and social media should be filled with correct information from a trusted source. Union of Concerned Scientists.
Mhm. Yeah, and I think we're also seeing some lawsuits about things like recyclability claims for some stuff that isn't actually recycled, but we need a whole lot more of it. There's so much marketing that's greenwashing that's been happening. So that's a huge area that we need more help with. And I work with a group at NYU. It's a group called SCAN of scientists at NYU who help with a lot of projects similar to that, but we need a lot more help.
Great. Pema writes, and we will address this in our annual meeting, so I will just raise it. Our local concern is that it appears that some waste haulers, garbage trucks throw the recyclables in with the garbage and all goes to the local burn plant, i.e. the incinerator. And actually a new program was just established by the Warren County Board of Supervisors, which will help prevent that. And we will talk about that briefly at the annual meeting. It's a long time.
Oh, I think we lost your volume again.
Oh, it's been a long time coming, but we will address that at our annual meeting business, when we do our report. And I think that's all the questions. Boy, what great participation from everyone. Many thoughtful questions. So I guess without further ado, I should thank you, Jenny. It's been a real pleasure. I think you've opened a lot of people's eyes, and we hope to continue working with you in some capacity.
Yeah, thanks so much for having me. Great turnout.
So yes, great turnout, and not all 87 people who signed up, but sure a good critical mass. So I'm going to turn it over to Liddell, but thank you. There have been many lovely comments in the chat, and I'll save the chat and I will send it to you.
Great, and I'm going to stick around for a few minutes to hear about your zero waste initiative.
Oh, great. Yes. Okay. Well, thanks so very much. So Liddell, do you want to take it away?
Sure. Maybe you want to talk among yourselves for just a minute while I set up the screen real quick.
And everyone is welcome to stay, whether or not you're a member. If you're not a member, you won't be able to vote in the election, but you're certainly very welcome to hear our report of what we've done in the past year. And I just want to do a little plug. The Clean Air Action Network is a membership organization. If you want to join, you can do so right now, or just do a one-time donation by going to the homepage, cleanairactionnetwork.org, and you'll see a button that says donate, and we accept donations. So, and we depend on donations. We are not funded by the government or industry.
Tracy, I think, can you see the,
Yes, it's good. It's working.
Oh, okay, great. And so I guess, Tracy, who wants to start? So there's a lot of text here, and it's basically kind of our annual year report, kind of unofficial. So Tracy, do you want to read? I'll just go to the next screen.
Yeah, I'll start, and I hope that Nancy, who is downstairs, will read too.
Okay.
So in May 2020, almost a year ago today, in the early months of the COVID pandemic, CAN held its first annual meeting. The occasion is marked with a virtual presentation by environmental lawyer Mike Ewell of the Energy Justice Network on how incineration and other noxious waste projects threaten the people and environment of Greater Glens Falls. You want to continue, Liddell?
Sure. CAN holds its first election for its board of directors with Helen, Liddell, myself, Nancy, Paul, and Tracy. The first board was assembled from a volunteer steering committee. June 2020, CAN sponsors a Zoom presentation by Dr. Paul Connett, emeritus chemistry professor at St. Lawrence University and a zero waste advocate and one of the most prominent incineration activists in the world. How we can breathe easier and recycle more, why we should shut down the Hudson Falls trash incinerator now. CAN obtains a small grant from CHEJ, Center for Health, Environment, and Justice. In July 2020, Rebecca Martin and Ben Jensen of Riverkeeper met with the board to assist with board training, and Rebecca suggests that CAN consider hiring a communications contractor using these grant monies. As under the grant, we committed to creating a website.
In July, Nancy, go for it.
July 2020, the CAN board creates a part-time contractor position with over 2 months, solicits applicants and conducts interviews. May 2020 through August 2020, CAN Zero Waste Committee drafts its zero waste vision for Warren County and collects nearly 50 endorsements from prominent county residents. August 2020, CAN Zero Waste Committee holds its first news conference. The event, Talking Trash, a citizen's response to Warren County's proposed solid waste plan, featured statements by 5 members and resulted in coverage in several area newspapers and a segment on the evening news. Members of the Zero Waste Committee also submitted formal comments on the solid waste plan and participated in the county's public meeting.
October 2020, CAN is pleased to welcome Abby Peckman, a graphic designer with experience and commitment to social justice movements, to its new 10 to 15 hour week contractor position as the media specialist and recruitment liaison. Abby's on vacation right now. And then in October 2020, the board invites Sue Sanderson and Marianne McGeorge, co-founders of the nonprofit Comfort Food Community of Washington County, to meet and share insights on strategy and organizational development. Liddell.
Sure. November 2020, Mike Elo presents a training on how to be an air pollution watchdog with an emphasis on strategic methods. Pema Reed recruited many of the participants for the watchdog effort. December 2020, the Pollution Watchdog Working Group convenes for the first time and begins to hold meetings the first and third Wednesday of each month.
December 2020, after learning that a Glens Falls official is actively exploring the potential for processing the city's sewage sludge for sale to farmers as a soil amendment, Tracy Frischme investigates toxic contaminants in the material. She submits a series of public records requests to the city wastewater treatment plant manager. A Cornell soil science professor reviews the data and states that if applied on land, the sludge would be detrimental to agricultural production and to the health of livestock or humans. The Glens Falls sewage sludge is not tested for PFAS chemicals. Though these forever chemicals are found in most sewage sludge and accumulate up the food chain.
January 2021, Zero Waste Committee member Barbara Jogri holds the first monthly meeting of the board of what will become a nonprofit called the Adirondack Compost Education Council. This group will secure funds and develop a food waste composting facility in Warren County and find a composter entrepreneur to own and run the composting business. To date, Barbara has identified a possible site for the facility, and a farmer composter who wants to help with the project is about to join the board. February 2021, with lots of input from the CAN board, Abby builds the first CAN website and creates the CAN logo. CAN website is launched.
February 2021, CAN holds a virtual town hall meeting at which Paul Hancock, PhD, and Dr. David Carpenter present a critique of the New York State Department of Health study that attributed the fact that Warren County has the highest cancer rates in the state outside of New York City to poor lifestyle choices, such as smoking, obesity, lack of exercises, and binge drinking, even though the statistics do not support the health department's conclusions. Considerable coverage by the Post-Star and other media outlets follow. New CAN member Angela Davis follows up with research on legacy PCB contamination. Liddell?
Oh, sorry, Sterigenics, a Kingsbury plant in March 2021. Sterigenics, a Kingsbury plant that sterilizes medical equipment using the known human carcinogen ethylene oxide and contaminated residential wells in the Jenkinsville part of Queensbury, located near several ordinary and industrial landfills, get on the CAN pollution watchdog radar. Also in March 2021, CAN participates in the Hudson Mohawk Clean Air Summit, along with other community environmental groups in the region. April 2021, CAN presents a well-received webinar on creating new jobs and enterprises through zero waste, featuring top leaders from around the U.S. in the field of reuse and repair. Neil Seldman of the Institute for Local Self-Reliance organized and moderated the event for CAN. CAN will host a follow-up business development summit on reuse and repair on June 15th. And then in February and April of 2021, CAN board member Helen Wolf participated in a series of workshops to build coalitions among energy-impacted communities across the Americas.
April 2021, with COVID restrictions easing, CAN begins a door-to-door canvass of Hudson Falls residents aimed at building a base in the village to help shut down the trash incinerator, which is called Wheelabrator Hudson Falls. Rosemary Madonna, a new CAN member who lives near Wheelabrator, provides essential guidance and inspiration for the canvas. CAN volunteers find many concerned residents eager for the incinerator to close. And also in April 2021, the Zero Waste Committee begins exploring the possibility of setting up a glass recycling pilot project after learning that glass containers collected at the town transfer stations are not getting recycled. Stay tuned for details.
May 2021, the Warren County Board of Supervisors approve a new program requiring all waste haulers be licensed by the county and file quarterly reports of the quantities of waste and recyclables they collect and where they are taken. This data is needed for planning purposes and to move towards zero waste. The Public Works Superintendent begins seeking applicants for a newly created position, the Solid Waste Recycling Compliance Coordinator. This new program will help prevent haulers from putting recyclables that residents put out in separate bins into their garbage trucks, as is often observed. Zero Waste Committee members congratulate one another on this victory.
Liddell? Or
Sure. I think there was a little glitch there, but May 2021, working with the Clean Air Coalition of Greater Queens-Ravena, the Southern Albany County group that has successfully opposed the Lafarge cement plant's efforts to burn tires, garbage, and other wastes, Tracy Frisch writes a memo in opposition to the Low Carbon Embodied Concrete Leadership Act, that's a New York State act, and sends it to the then 24 Assembly sponsors and 9 Senate sponsors of this false climate solution legislation. The bill would incentivize cement and concrete companies to sell products to the state that are made using alternatives to fossil fuels, which are very likely to involve burning wastes that generate toxic emissions. An even worse version of the bill was introduced in the last week of May.
just this week. And then to top it off, May 2021, CAN host sustainability expert Jennie Romer, Esquire, to speak about her new book, Can I Recycle This? A Guide to Better Recycling and Single-Use Plastics on the occasion of our 2nd annual meeting. The end.
And we wish to thank each and every person who has made this work possible with their time and support. Together we can make a difference. And I'm going to stop sharing now and return to our screen. Thank you, everyone.
So if anyone has any major questions, you're welcome to ask them, unmute yourself and ask them. Otherwise, we will move to the election part of the evening, I believe. Is that correct?
Oh, wait, Tracy, can we first do some remarks from Helen and Paul, please?
Of course, of course.
And I just want to preface this with, so I just want to make clear that that list that you saw of accomplishments, the primary driver of all of those accomplishments was our own Tracy Frisch, who was just speaking. And so Tracy, as you can tell, has been very busy this past year, and she needs a little break. So she will not be continuing on the board. And we're incredibly grateful for all the efforts she has put in to launch us. And so I'm asking Helen and Paul to speak both about Tracy and also Nancy. Nancy will also be stepping down from the board and has been one of our founding members and just, really critical to getting us on our feet this year. So Helen and Paul, I'll pass off to you.
Okay, I'll speak first. Thanks, Liddell. So I sort of titled this Our Friend Tracy. And Tracy Frisch is a friend. She's been the foundation of the Pollution Watchdog Committee and the entire Clean Air Action Network since its inception. Those people in the Greenwich Citizens Committee would not recognize this organization. Under Tracy's leadership, we've taken on the most pressing issues facing the health of the residents of the entire capital region. Our purpose is not just to change laws, change behavior, and wake people up, but to get at why we find ourselves suffering from polluted air, water, and soil contamination, what it has meant to our health, and how we can bring to account the systems, agencies, and corporations responsible for these wrongs. In short, we're out to change the world. If you're a decision maker in a position to right these wrongs and you refuse to do it, then we want you out of power. You're going to hear from us. Tracy will make sure of that. Tracy's breadth of knowledge about environmental insults, the chemistry, physics, and transmission paths of those insults and how they enter our bodies and what damage they do in both the short term and over a lifetime is far more developed than most experts she cites. If she does not know it immediately, she knows where to find the answer or the beginning of an answer to most questions about environmental harm. Having an encyclopedic memory doesn't hurt. Tracy's interests are not bounded by the environment. I'm sure others have been the beneficiary of her recommendations of books, news and journal articles, podcasts, and films that have aligned with interests she knows they care about. Everyone who is a member of CAN knows, and in many cases on a first name basis, with many more experts, authors, public officials, and institutional leaders than they may ever knew existed. Ms. Frisch finds those people, sometimes in the shadows, who can make a difference by adding to our knowledge of how the world works. Tracy has known that the DSA, the Democratic Socialists of America, of which I am a co-chair here, that we're working on police reform issues. As a consequence, she has been feeding me a steady stream of references about policing practices and reforms in cities around the country. She is a priceless resource of information on numerous topics that she encounters on her ceaseless journey through the knowledge bases she frequents. Few can match the tenacious quest for more and more information about issues of importance that show us how the world works. Fear not, my friends. The whirlwind that is Tracy will not be going too far away. We will continue to benefit from her work. Now, however, we thank you for how you have prepared us for our coming work. One thing we've learned from you is that it's work that never ends. Thanks a lot, Tracy.
Thank you, Paul. That is so sweet. That is very, very nice. And I feel like CAN is going to be in very good hands with the new people, with the current and the incoming board members. I'm really, really thrilled. And I want to thank all the board members for all that they've done to assist in the transition.
Okay, so then I would like to add a few words about our friend Nancy. Okay, so Nancy too has been involved with CAN since the earliest days. But in fact, her activism around local environment issues goes back a long time. She's an avid outdoors woman and has an appreciation for our Hudson River environment that runs deep. Having lived in the area almost all of her life, she also provides a historical perspective that often addresses many of the questions those new to the area may pose. As a retired teacher, Nancy has brought her skills of organization, thoughtful preparation, and research to CAN and been very supportive of all of CAN's endeavors. While Nancy is stepping down from the board, she too will continue as an active member, and whoever is lucky enough to canvass in Hudson Falls with her will also get an education on the local plant life. Nancy has been a very positive influence and a voice of reason and understanding as CAN has grown. We look forward to her continued involvement and are very thankful for all of her contributions to date. Thank you very much, Nancy, and we look forward to working with you as time goes forward. Thank you.
Oh, and maybe if we don't mind, if Sean could put a little plug in. I see a lot of people have already kind of left the meeting, but just put a little plug in for a few minutes and then we'll do the vote. Is that okay, Tracy?
Sure. Yes. So,
Okay, sure. Can you hear me good?
Yep.
Yes.
All right, thanks. So I'm Sean. I'm a new volunteer, and I'm one of those people that Tracy found in the shadows that Paul mentioned. And all of a sudden, here I am becoming a member of the board. So it can happen to you. And I appreciate all the help that Tracy's given me. She's been absolutely amazing. I couldn't have asked for a better crash course from all you folks in learning about our area and how to help it and be a healthier environment. And so I just want to remind everyone that's still here that this is an all volunteer organization, except for, again, an hourly wage for someone to help us with facilitating and putting together some social media. And we're a nonprofit 501c3 organization. So any help that you could provide to us is greatly appreciated, including donations, which are 100% tax deductible. And that goes to pay for speakers and printing and marketing. And we hopefully will have some in-person meetings and social functions coming up. And some ideas we have are to do like future air quality experts for local school kids who are working in that field, in the P-TECH programs in Queensbury, or a Run for Clean Air, Clean the River campaign. So we got a lot of great ideas to boost the awareness, to organize the people and activate everybody to get them all involved in these really, really serious issues going on. So if you have any experience or know anyone with experience with grant writing or fundraising, media relations, social media, content creation, we would really love to hear from you at our email, contact@cleanairactionnetwork.org. And we also, because we don't have the funds to pay for somebody to help us with all the social media stuff, we're looking for interns as well too. And so if you know somebody that's college age that has some time off in the summer, that's looking to get some unbelievable experience with environmental justice issues that are affecting a very small community with a wide spectrum of different environmental issues going on, please let us know that as well too. Internship information is on our website as well. So any college kids with communications or government or environmental science experience, design, economics, any of that stuff, we love, even if it's 8 to 10 or even 5 hours a week, we'll accept anything.
We have some very good applicants already that Abby is working with.
We do have some great applicants already, and we're very fortunate. And again, these are unpaid internships. We'd love to do stipends, and hopefully maybe with some donations in the future, that might be something we can do. But yeah, so we thank you for all your support and help. And I think it's going to be an unbelievable year because of what Tracy and Paul and Nancy and Helen and Liddell, everyone's built. And I think we're just going to keep building on that. So thank you.
Thanks so much, Sean. And I'll pass it back to Tracy. So this is our annual meeting. So we have about 2 minutes just to conduct our vote. Tracy.
Okay, so we decided to do our remote voting by people posting in the chat if you want to make it where we have a slate of candidates. So I will introduce the people who are running for election. I guess at this point we have 1-year terms. So Liddell is running. You've seen her in action. Paul is running. Sean is running. And then let's see. Oh, Nancy, you're named Tracy again. Helen is running for re-election, and I think that Tom is on the phone. Tom Ellis is running. Tom is an experienced environmental activist from Albany who has worked with grassroots groups for 40 years as a volunteer primarily. And Angela Davis, who has done great work researching the legacy of PCBs in the area. Angela, too, is running. And did I miss anyone? I hope not. Sean is running. Okay, Sean is not on the board yet, is running. So that is the slate of candidates. And we're just looking for people who are actually members of the group. And membership means that you have made a donation within the last 12 months. And so if you are a member, including those people who are on the board, you can vote. And just Angela might not be here. Angela has little kids, so maybe Angela had to leave. She was here. So we're not voting for individuals. You don't have to remember people's names. You just vote yes or no. And if you want to make that a secret ballot, you can just vote yes to me. And if you have not changed your name, Nancy, if your name is Tracy, because we are co-hosting, then you might want to change your name because okay, so you could just say, yes, I'm favor, yes. And thank you. And so let's just leave like 2 more minutes for voting. And if you are not a member, there's Angela coming in. If you are not a member, we want to very much encourage you to become a member, even, or to at least make a donation, because we run on these donations. That's what pays Abby's compensation as a contractor. So we have a heavy lift there. And we are most grateful for an anonymous donor that gave us a $5,000 donation earlier this year. If it wasn't for her, we would be bankrupt right now. So, Angela, would you like to say a few words?
Hi, yeah, I just wanted to say that I have been on. I just called in, and for some reason it won't let me talk. Like I'm muted from a different point. But so I did call in, but I was able to get my Zoom to work. So I just wanted to say hi, everyone. I've been here.
Well,
So
we really appreciate you, Angela. It's great for people to just come on board and step up and start helping in big ways.
thank you. And thank you, Tracy. I just kind of, I was listening to what Paul said, and I think it's so true in just the short time. I think you've done so much and really have given me so much information. And I think just becoming a member, I have learned so much and keep learning. And I think that's the most important part is even if you're nervous to start or you don't have a big background in anything that we're talking about, the best thing is to become a member and at least learn. So if I could give anyone advice, that would be it, to just come on board and learn and then go from there.
Yeah, and Tom, I'm asking you to unmute. I think it's *6, but if you want to say a few words, we'd love to have you do that. I see you're unmuted.
I'm unmuted now.
Yes, so if you want to say a bit about yourself or why you're interested in joining the board.
Okay, yeah, some of you already know me. My name's Tom Ellis. I live in Albany. I still work I'm 65 years old. I work as a teacher at a boarding school for at-risk teenage girls here in Albany. I've done that for a long time. And for the last 40 years, I've worked as a safe energy and an environmental health advocate and organizer, mostly as a volunteer. And I'm familiar with the Glens Falls, Hudson Falls region. As a young person, I spent a week up in Bolton Landing each summer. I've been to Glens Falls many times. I worked for an attorney in Albany from 1986 to 1990, Louis Oliver, and he represented the town of Monroe in its successful fight to get General Electric to pay for a new water supply system in part of the town. And he also was the village attorney for Hudson Falls, a consultant. in their effort to block the Hudson Falls incinerator. And here in the Albany area, I've worked with a lot of different groups. One group, we prevented the city of Albany from siting a regional solid waste landfill in Queens. I was part of a group not really a group, but like a network of people, and we were able to act very quickly and decisively and shut down the Answers trash incinerator in downtown Albany in January 1994 after it malfunctioned twice. I worked with another group called Don't Waste New York. We blocked the state of New York and the nuclear power industry from siting a so-called low-level radioactive waste disposal facility. One of their 10 target areas was in Fort Ann, I think. And I remember there was a meeting about it at the high school in Hudson Falls, January 1989, and there were like 600 people in there. And other than the commissioners, there wasn't one person in the room that wanted a nuclear waste dump in Washington County. So we won that one. Yeah, so right now I'm working with people in Rensselaer. We're trying to shut down a landfill, a C&D landfill that's right next to a school. And I've worked for 15 years with people in Queens and Ravenna, and we just won a victory where DEC decided that Lafarge cannot burn tires in its cement kiln on Route 9W in Ravenna, which is literally right across the street from two schools. So I've been involved in a lot of successful environmental and public health campaigns, and I've met with Rosemary a few times. I've walked around the neighborhood near the incinerator, and that thing has to get shut down as fast as possible. I'm convinced it's a serious environmental health hazard, and it needs to be shut down. And I have some ideas on how to do that I'm working on with people in the group.
Thank
I
you.
hope I didn't go on too long.
No, it's great. And thanks, Tom. And if anyone wants to say anything, if there's anyone who hasn't voted and wants to vote, I think it's clear that the new board members are shoo-ins, and we will look at the votes afterwards, but I don't see anyone voting against them. And we are thrilled to welcome Sean, Angela, and Tom as new board members. And I guess if anyone wants to say anything, feel free to speak. And otherwise, I think we'll say good night and look for you. Our newsletter is going to come out within the next 2 weeks, and we'll be having a pollution watchdog meeting and a zero waste meeting. And if you are not involved but want to get involved in one of those efforts or in canvassing in Hudson Falls, we totally welcome you. And if you don't have any other emails but mine, feel free to email me and I will pass it on to the appropriate people.
Could I?
Yes, go for it.
Super quick, because this meeting was so close to what would have been our regular watchdog meeting on June 2nd, we're going to skip that meeting and just do some work. I'll send an email out about that, just kind of make it a work time for people to work on projects individually or in small groups or maybe canvas. But so that means our next watchdog meeting will be on the 19th, but there will be emails to follow soon. Thank you.
Yeah, and so thanks again for everything. It's been great working with every one of you that's been involved, and I look forward to knowing new people who are getting involved. Even though I won't be serving on the board, I will not be going away far. Okay, so one big round of thanks for everyone, and welcome to the new board members.
Thank you.
Thanks,
everybody.
everyone.
Have a
Thank
great
you.
night.
Great to see you.
Bye.
Bye-bye.
Bye.
Good evening. Happy Memorial Day.
Yeah.
You too.
And bye now.